Aloha, I'm Malia Zimmerman. This is challenging times for small businesses in Hawaii, and especially for the agriculture businesses as well. And today we have three guests on the show who are going to talk to us about what the challenges are and how those could be made easier for them to operate and to be more successful so that they can build jobs and help the economy. Today I'd like to welcome Congressman Ed Case. He was a congressman from 2002 to 2007. He's been on the show before. Lois Shimabukuro, she's from Calais Eggs, and also Marissa Capaluto, who is from Oahu Express. And this is sure to be a fiery show because I know you all have strong opinions and you have a lot of experience to share with us today. Ed, could you give me a little background on what is the Jones Act and how is that impacting businesses in Hawaii? Because we hear from businesses over and over that that is a big barrier to business.
The Jones Act is a federal law, so this is a law created by Congress several decades ago. And what it says very simply is that if you transport goods between two U.S. ports, you have to use U.S. shipping. U.S. shipping that's built in the United States, operated in the United States, and flagged in the United States. Sounds reasonable. The problem is that there is a lot of shipping out there in the world, and the United States built ships and United States flagships are in the distinct minority, and as a result, we are basically missing out on the competitive market advantage that is offered by the fact that there are a lot of ships out there that would be perfectly willing and able to service the trade between Hawaii and the mainland. Now, if you are coming down the Mississippi River from Minneapolis to New Orleans with a cargo of corn or something like that, and you don't like what the shippers are offering on the Mississippi River, well, you can do a train, you can do a bus, you can theoretically do an airplane, although you probably wouldn't do it. The point is you have advantages. But when you are part of a non-contiguous part of our country, which is the parts of our country that are not part of the mainland, so Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Alaska, Guam, there is only one way to do it, and that's by ship. And essentially what happens because of the Jones Act is that we have a federally created monopoly, basically a monopoly, and monopolies are not good for business other than if you have the monopoly. If you have the monopoly, then it's very good for business, but it's not very good for everybody else. So as a result, the Jones Act shippers who service us, and almost all of our goods are brought in by container ship from the mainland, so Matson, Horizon, you pay substantially more in unit charge, way more in unit charge than anywhere else in the world virtually. And that's just death to a lot of our small businesses. They can't afford that kind of cost premium stacked on top of all of the other problems with their costs.
Now, yes, your sister, Lois, you operate the business with your sister, Phyllis, and it was a family business, the egg business. And are you the only egg producer? Is that true? Locally owned egg producer?
There are three smaller ones, but we do the commercial distribution, which is to the retail markets, the restaurants. The other three are not involved in a large-scale commercial distribution.
So you have a lot of challenges with being in agriculture and shipping and so on. Can you talk a little bit about how does the Jones Act impact your business directly with cost and so on?
Well, all of our egg cartons are manufactured in Georgia. It's shipped in. And when we bring in our egg cartons, we're faced with the fuel surcharge, the high freight. And every component of our packing materials is manufactured on the mainland. After Weyerhaeuser shut down their plant here, we were forced to procure our corrugated boxes from the mainland. So every piece of packing material, whether it's egg cartons, and the egg cartons go into the corrugated boxes, that's another charge that we were imposed on. And so it adds up on our costs to do business, and that's why local eggs are more expensive than mainland eggs, because mainland eggs just get one surcharge coming in for the freight. Egg flats, the filler flats that you see in the restaurants that they use with their eggs on it, packing materials, tape, everything that's manufactured outside of Hawaii that gets shipped in, the cost is passed on to us, and then we have to either absorb it or we have to pass it on to our customers.
Right. Now, Marissa, you operate a Wahoo Express, and so you deal a lot with shipping.
Oh, yes.
And you have strong opinions on the Jones Act. How does that affect you and your customers?
Oh, it's a lot. Especially, of course, the end users. Our consumers are here in Hawaii are pretty much taking all the heat because we passed on whatever, the steamship dictated. For example, this time next year, by January 2012, Matson they came out with 5.5% increase on their tariff. I've been in business here in Hawaii, shipping business for 20 plus years. I have not seen a 5.5 increase from Matson and Horizon Lines. It's always been 3.5, and I'm sure Phyllis, you know that, right?
Lois, yeah.
Lois, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, it's uncalled for. They should have put that to us as shipping consumers. 5.5, that's a lot of money because your top line is about $3,000, 5% of that. That's still a lot of money. So to me, seeing Matson the way they dictate the price, we as consumer are pretty much under, we're like nobody's scrutinizing their rates. We'll always get thrown out in the bus, you gotta go pay for this, no matter what we say, because there is no FMC, nobody regulate Matson and Horizon Line rates. The tariff is just outrageous. It needs to be redone. Because sometimes there's some commodities. The commodities are more, are less than the amount of the shipping. The price of shipping the commodity is more. So how can you stay in business if you're paying more on shipping than buying your commodities, your product to sell? It's hard, and you'll be surprised. Even me, I have to beg sometimes. If I have to run, for example, steel, I want to buy a 40-foot container steel product from, I would say, California. If I have to run it to Nogales through Mexico, it's faster than Matson and it's cheaper. But I have to go through customs. So there's some routing that I can route cargo for customers. But the problem is the customs down here. And this is important, this meeting, because, Congressman Case is here, because we have to let the Congress people know we can get some creative routings that we can save the consumers money on how we route all this cargo. Because if we don't talk to these congressmen or our senators, Hawaii consumers will suffer more. We will never get better any way you want to think about. So everybody has to communicate, has to sit down. And right now, we have no leadership. Nobody's leading the transportation. Who's doing what? We can have plenty meetings, but if nobody from our leadership in this state of Hawaii, come up with ideas or solutions, that we can, get something resolved with this Jones Act, with this pricing, with this, of course, the gas, the fuel, nothing's going to get, I would say we're still going to be like this. Our future generation will suffer more.
So, Ed, when you were in Congress, which was from 2002 to 2007, you took on this issue in a big way. What happened to you, and what were the changes that you wanted to make?
Well, I got into this because at the time I represented the 2nd Congressional District, and the 2nd Congressional is the entire state of Hawaii other than urban Honolulu. And so I represented all of the farmers and the ranchers and the agricultural interests in the entire state. And for them, the Jones Act wasn't just some abstract, public policy. It was a direct, in many cases, a life or death situation because, as Lois has said, first of all, they had to get almost everything that they used in the agricultural industry off of a Jones Act ship. There was no other alternative. I mean, they could fly it in, but that would be more expensive. So not just their egg cartons, but for example, their fertilizer. For example, a whole range of agricultural equipment that they had to use in their farms. That couldn't come in except at an incredible cost. And so that was crippling to them at a time when they were obviously competing with the Central Valley of California and the large-scale agricultural interests that were importing into the big box retailers down here. Almost, well, not almost, but equally significant was that the Jones Act doesn't just affect imports, what we bring in from the mainland, it also affects exports. And for our agricultural industry, oftentimes exports are also the answer to survival. The ranching industry was the perfect example. The ranchers came to me and said, hey, we have this non-Jones Act ship, specially built to take cattle along ocean voyages, but it's not a U.S. flag vessel. It's flagged in Denmark, I think it was. Specially designed, specially built, and they would be happy to enter into a contract with us to take our cattle directly from Kauai High on the Big Island, which is the harbor on the Big Island out of which you take the cattle from Parker Ranch, for example, right to where we want it to go, which is Stockton, California. That's where the cattle wants to go. Stockton, California. That's the transit point for cattle. Okay, we can't do that. Why? Because Matson doesn't serve Kauai High to Stockton, California. Matson only goes from Honolulu to Oakland. Now that meant that the cattle had to get from the Big Island to Honolulu, wait around for a ship to go up to the mainland, and they could catch the ship after about 3 or 4 days of hanging in the harbor and get up to Oakland, not to Stockton. Then they had to get to Stockton and into their feed yards. Now that was time, and what happens with cattle over time is you lose the cattle's weight if they're on a long ocean voyage. So what's important is get them there fast, get them there efficiently, and it was taking twice as long and they were losing money. So they said, well, why don't we just let the export side of this go? So in other words, we'll do an exemption of the Jones Act that says if it's an export out of Hawaii, that'll be exempt and you can use foreign flag vessels. No, that was not something that the Jones Act folks wanted. They don't want this opened up whatsoever. So they're quite concerned that if there's any change to the law, no matter how reasonable. I also introduced a proposal that said, keep the Jones Act for the mainland, at least they have choices. But when you're on a non-contiguous area, it's the only way to get from the mainland to Guam, to Hawaii, to Puerto Rico, let that one go. No, they want to do that one either. So it's been a real struggle. Interestingly, in the last year, the U.S. Department of Justice has investigated the Jones Act shipping industry in Puerto Rico and actually has brought criminal charges for collusion on prices with the Jones Act shippers there. And those shippers have paid huge fines because basically they've admitted to collusion. That's what happens in a monopoly or a duopoly. So,
and those companies actually operate here.
At least
Horizon,
one. At least one. At least Horizon, which is one of the two principal shippers. So, you know, there are a number of proposals that, to me, would make some reasonable sense and take care of our agricultural producers, take care of our consumers, take care of our construction industry. They're hurt by the Jones Act. Take care of our hotel industry. They're hurt. I mean, everybody pays a premium for it. The question from a public policy perspective is it worth it? And my answer is not at that price. So let's find a price at which we can try to maintain an American maritime industry, but not at the cost to a state like Hawaii, which it really disproportionately impacts us significantly. So I'm obviously not a favorite of the folks that support the Jones Act, and they're quite powerful and influential. And why? They have a monopoly. And when you have a monopoly, you're going to do anything you can to preserve that monopoly.
Right.
You do anything you can do to get a monopoly, and you do anything you can do to preserve it.
So I know that I've written a lot about the fact that you've lost endorsements and quite a considerable campaign funds because of your support for the against the Jones Act, as did Charles DeJoux when he ran for Congress as well. So it's a heated discussion, and it's amazing because I talk to so many small businesses that are hurt and tell similar stories. But when it comes down to it, there's just a few very powerful people here who are keeping it, who want to keep it the way it is, and with ties to Washington. And certainly our congressional delegation that's in there now all support the Jones Act, from what I understand. Is that correct?
That's correct, and it's also obviously going to be an issue in the U.S. Senate election coming up because certainly my Democratic opponent is a strong supporter of the Jones Act and has gotten, I don't know how many campaign dollars at this point, probably 50,000 in campaign contributions directly related to the Jones Act from the so-called Jones Act lobby. So they're intent on having somebody represent them that's not going to rock the boat, not even going to talk about the issue. They really don't even like to talk about it.
So, Lois, tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you're facing and how this ties into, the business climate here and how you see it going for you. How do you see it improving, or is it getting more challenging?
It's more challenging. We bring in a lot of feed for the chickens, and we're faced with about a 33.5% freight and surcharge that impacts the cost of our ability to do business and provide food for the state. And it has become very expensive with the grain prices skyrocketing, especially in corn and soy. It has, it's come to the point where we're wondering whether it's worth continuing the business because of all the escalating costs. And we have to pass it on.
And it's it's a business that you've had. I mean, tell us a little bit about. It's been in your family for a long time, right?
I'm a third generation. My sister and I are third generation. We call ourselves farmers, you know, over the years, when my grandfather started the business, it was in 1947. And then my father and his brothers continued the business, grew the business. And now we're in the business, and we honestly feel that it's become so, our hands are tied, you know, a lot of times, because we're at the mercy of restrictions. You know, there's no manufacturing here, so we can't source local product for our business. And like Ed said, everything has to be shipped in, you know, equipment, and it's very costly. And for me, the cost of my egg cartons are less than the cost of the freight. So it's, you know, it's just one thing after another, and we feel that we have no choice, so we ship through Matson.
And so you keep going and keep going, but at what point do you make that decision to not be able to? I mean, we've seen so many businesses in Hawaii that have closed, and what would that mean for the people of Hawaii if you did close? They would not, you know, they wouldn't be a choice of eating local fresh eggs versus mainland eggs that are, some of them are being shipped in from Iowa to the California coast and then shipped to Honolulu or to Hawaii. And then there would probably be a huge price war on mainland, because there's so many producers out there, you know, from the Northwest down to California and, you know, central United States, Midwest. But the thing that I think really bothers us is the fact that there's a huge sustainability platform in Hawaii right now. And in order for Hawaii to maintain a food supply, we have to support local production of not just produce, but also there's no dairy industry, there's no pork industry, and there's no fresh chicken industry. I think we're the last, you know, animal-related agricultural industry. Wow, it's pretty serious. You know, we hear Ed, you were in the legislature. And we would hear over and over and over about sustainability plans, and all these things are introduced, and let's have sustainability by 2050 and so on. And we talk about energy sustainability and so on, and farming and supporting the local people. But it's not just about buying local. It's also about creating an environment where you can survive and thrive. And I think that's one of the challenges. Marissa, what about you?
Well, me, I have lots of issues because I got to see it. I'm on that problems. Number one is the Senate Bill 98. I think that's the PASHA bill.
You mean, the local bill?
The Young Brothers. They can compete up to 2013. It was passed. I think Rosalynn Baker, the senator of Maui, she was the one that spearheaded that bill. And she doesn't realize it really hurts her island.
It's kind of an anti-PASHA, pro-Young Brothers bill.
Yeah, that's correct. What it is right now, everybody's using Young Brothers only to outer islands. And what happened is Young Brothers cut their hours. 2 out of 5 days in a week, they cut them to like 11:30 only to outer islands. So what happened? The line is backed up. I went there myself. The line is like, I was there for 2 boxes to drop off. I was there for an hour and a half. The guys that has flatbeds, they were there for 2.5 hours on the line trying to check in and drop off. And of course, the cost, the gas, the driver sitting down there, the downtime, it'll be passed on to outer islands. So her island, which is Maui, they're getting all those pass-on charges. She just alienated and just pretty much crucified her island. And again, of course, Young Brothers own a business. They have to cut their hours. They have to cut their manpower. But who's getting the hit? Again, the end users. That's one of the things the legislatures in Hawaii, they don't realize what they're doing. It will impact everybody. We don't want to be in the line. I would rather go back on the road, make more, you know, pick up deliveries. We can earn more. But they tied that thing down, the monopoly. You shouldn't be doing that. Let everybody do business. Don't dictate the people, where do you want to send your truck, where you want to do business. Open that to everybody. You can't just close the loop like that. You kill the people.
And that's one of the issues that you've addressed as well. And that's kind of the Jones Act is kind of the symbol of what she's talking about, which is limiting competition by by American-made vessels with American-made
Well,
crews and so on.
in the big picture of public policy, what we're really talking about is trying to preserve competition and avoid monopolies, avoid centralizations of economic power. Because again, I'll say it for the third time, you know, if you can get a monopoly, it's a great thing for your business. It's not a great thing for anybody else. And that's why for a long, long time in this country, we've said we're gonna try to prevent monopolies from coming about, and that's good public policy. Unfortunately, for us here in Hawaii, when you're in a small state that is, you know, the distance that we are from anywhere else in the world, a monopoly can have a real disproportionate effect. And if you look around us and think about it for a second, we really have centralizations of economic power all around us. We've talked only about one, ocean shipping. We've talked about another one here, inter-island shipping. But we have real centralizations of economic power in a lot of areas. Inter-island, you know, airlines, electric power, you know, healthcare insurance. I don't know what it is about our society, whether it's a remnant of the plantation society where, you know, we went to the company store to get everything and, you know, that was the deal, or what it is, but we have allowed these things to happen. And the real key, and you said it very well, government is not supposed to be creating monopolies. Government is supposed to be preventing monopolies. And when we have, by law or by regulation, and it is true with the inter-island shipping, which is heavily slanted towards a monopoly in inter-island shipping and against any entry by anybody else into that, and that's what happened with Young Brothers and Pasha. When you have that really by regulation, sometimes it's a little indirect. It's not quite as direct as the Jones Act. Sometimes it's just the approval process for anybody else to get in and compete is slanted against you to start with. We have that in healthcare, for example. So these are things that should be changed at the state law and state regulation perspective. The feds is a whole other story.
Mm-hmm. And it's you know, the way the legislature works, it just seems like, I mean, you were in there. I've been covering the legislature for, unfortunately, a really long time. And we do tend to see over and over again where there's somebody who introduces a bill for somebody who then creates like within the, you know, some kind of monopoly. So what do we do about it? When, you know, we have 76 legislators who are all have their own issues, and then you have the federal legislation. Ed, what are some solutions do you think for Hawaii that could be introduced?
In all honesty, I think it's more about the people that are making the decisions rather than the proposals. The fact of the matter is that where you have those centralizations of power, they also have a centralization of influence in the legislative process, and they tend to get involved in elections, and they tend to contribute money to candidates, and they tend to develop relationships with candidates that those candidates, when they get into office, don't want to counter. And the you know, if you are the holder of a monopoly, you're far more interested in keeping that monopoly than the folks that are negatively impacted by you are interested in preventing that monopoly. The fact of the matter is that what we're talking about is a monopoly versus all of the consumers. And so the problem is it's not as easy for all the businesses and all the consumers to lobby collectively at the legislature as opposed to that monopoly trying to prevent any change from happening. So the answer really is to get involved in elections. The answer really is, and I hate to say it, but it's really the only way to do this, is to get folks in there that are a little bit more independent. Try to cut through the chaff of the political campaigns and understand who stands for what. Follow the money in political campaigns and figure out who's actually contributing and why. And then act collectively, Small Business Hawaii, the agricultural producers and industry need. And in respect to the agricultural industry, it wasn't that much of a collective effort when I was in Congress. I had the ranchers and the exotic flower producers and the this and the that. They all had the common interest, but they really had not banded together. So there needs to be a centralization of counter-influence.
If you could change one thing or two things in the business community here, or in the government, what would you do in terms of what would help you the most?
I would hope that we would get a little bit more of a sympathetic ear when we're voicing our concerns about, shipping fees and other business-related laws or regulations. I think that sometimes a lot of our elected officials, like Ed said, they're more concerned about the support of, private interest groups, and they're forgetting to see the bigger picture of how agriculture sustains the state, or how it affects other businesses, and how we feed to other businesses, and they in turn, work together with us to continue to provide an economic level of, support for the state in general. So I would hope that someone would be mindful of listening to our concerns and challenges.
So it's just going back to what Ed said, which is better representation,
Yes,
or
exactly.
at least listening to the people. Marissa, if you had to sum it up in a minute, what would you say about what would you change in the business community? What would help you the most, or in the government?
Oh, of course, number one, our lawmakers. They have to open their eyes, their ears, listen to the people that's out there, especially small business, because it's far more us business, small business, the one that really sacrificing and make the state, moving from trades and commerce. Without us, nothing's really gonna, sustain what our people in public office or civil service can get from the state without our small business. Well, what I did this past, 2-3 months, when the Senate Bill, Senate Bill 254, the $52 additional for per container.
For Matson,
Matson
right.
and Horizon Line. As soon as I seen that email, it's an arbitrary Hawaii General Excise Tax, $52 per ocean container. I seen that email came from my computer. I sent back an email to Matson, to the Vice President of Matson, which is Gary Nakamatsu, and my sales reps from Matson. I told them that needs to be stopped. Stop.
And they did actually end up you did actually cause a big ruckus,
Oh,
I remember.
yeah. I'm sorry.
And actually did get them to do it, which is nothing to apologize for. It's a good thing. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here, getting better representation and also speaking up and doing what you can to take action.
Yeah, because I'm just one. Imagine if thousands of us will do the same thing.
Yes, imagine that.
You know what I'm saying? That's very,
I've
very.
been looking for that for a long time now.
Imagine me. I risk everything. I even ran for office. Why
Yeah.
do I have to do that? Why?
Ask Ed.
You know what I'm saying?
I
No, the
asked
thing is,
myself the same
Lois,
question.
you're the only one here that hasn't run of the three of you, so you'll have to get
I have children to raise. I have. See, that's the thing. That's important. Our consumer people in Hawaii, they're gonna have to think twice, more than twice.
Yeah.
Who represent your district?
Yep. Okay, well, we're already out of time. Can you believe it? Thank you for joining us today. We've covered a lot of important issues, and I know people will be able to watch the show and learn a lot, and of course, we'll continue the coverage too and have you on again. Thank you for joining us today. This has been News Behind the News. Aloha.